Welcome to World Prism. The world doesn't pause and neither do we. Get the unfiltered flow of breaking news, essential global updates, and the deep insights that transform information into true foresight. If it matters, you'll find the complete spectrum here. Ready to see the world clearly? Smash that subscribe button and turn on the notifications. A historic legal battle has just ended, testing the limits of presidential power over the economy. For months, President Trump's sweeping tariffs, taxes on imports, have been challenged in court, raising questions about whether a president can unilaterally reshape America's trade relationships. The Supreme Court was asked to decide if Trump's use of the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, IEEPA, to impose tariffs was constitutional. An appeals court had already ruled against the president, setting up a dramatic Supreme Court showdown. Billions in tariff revenue had already been collected, affecting prices for American businesses and families. In a landmark decision, the Supreme Court struck down the legal basis for Trump's most controversial tariffs, reaffirming limits on executive power even in emergencies. The ruling will have lasting consequences for trade, inflation, and the balance of power in Washington. A tariff is a tax on imported goods, making foreign products more expensive. Governments use tariffs to raise revenue and protect domestic industries from cheaper foreign competition, a strategy called protectionism. For example, tariffs on imported furniture make American-made furniture more competitive. But tariffs also mean higher prices for consumers, as importers pass the extra cost along. This can fuel inflation, making everyday goods more expensive. Tariffs can also trigger trade wars as countries retaliate with their own taxes, hurting exporters and disrupting global supply chains. The goal of protecting one industry often leads to unintended consequences for others. That's why tariffs remain a controversial tool in economic policy. President Trump's trade policy relied on two legal tools, each with its own unique implications and controversies. First, he used IEEPA, a law meant for emergencies, to justify broad tariffs on countries like China, Mexico, and Canada, an unprecedented move that shook global trade norms. In 2025, the administration announced sweeping trafficking tariffs and a universal 10% tariff on goods from 185 countries, affecting a wide range of industries and products. Critics argued IEEPA was never meant for general trade policy, sparking the legal fight that reached the Supreme Court. This legal battle questioned the extent of presidential power in trade matters. Second, Trump used Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, which allows tariffs on imports threatening national security. This provision was originally designed to protect the country during wartime. As IEEPA faced legal challenges, the administration ramped up Section 232 tariffs, targeting everything from steel to pharmaceuticals, with rates as high as 100%. This aggressive stance aimed to bolster domestic industries. The Commerce Department is now investigating even more sectors for future tariffs, indicating that the administration's protectionist policies are far from over. This two-pronged approach ensured Trump's tariff agenda continued, even as one legal basis collapsed, showcasing the administration's determination to reshape U.S. trade policy. At the heart of the tariff debate lies a fundamental constitutional question: who truly holds the reins of power when it comes to trade and taxation, Congress or the president? This struggle is not just about economics, but about the very structure of American government and the balance of power between its branches. The Constitution clearly grants Congress the authority to levy taxes and regulate commerce with foreign nations. This power was designed to ensure that decisions affecting the nation's economy would be debated and decided by the people's representatives. Yet, over the years, Congress has chosen to delegate some of this authority to the executive branch, especially in times of crisis or when national security is at stake. This delegation was meant to allow the president to act swiftly when urgent action was needed. Critics argue that President Trump pushed these emergency powers far beyond what Congress ever intended, using them to impose sweeping tariffs and reshape trade policy almost single-handedly. Supporters, however, insist that in a rapidly changing world, economic security is inseparable from national security. They believe the president must have the flexibility to respond quickly to threats and opportunities without waiting for lengthy congressional debates. This ongoing conflict is a classic tug-of-war between two visions of government, one that fears the rise of an imperial presidency, and another that worries Congress is too slow and divided to protect American interests in a globalized economy. With the stakes so high, the Supreme Court was called upon to act as referee, tasked with interpreting the Constitution and deciding where the limits of executive power should be drawn. The court's decision would not only determine the outcome of this particular dispute, but also set a precedent for how much authority future presidents could wield over trade and economic policy. Ultimately, the outcome would shape the future of American economic policy, influencing how the nation responds to global challenges for years to come. The Supreme Court faced a tough choice: strike down Trump's tariffs and reaffirm Congress's authority, or uphold them and expand presidential power. Ruling against the president would mean refunding billions in tariff revenue and disrupting markets, but it would restore the traditional balance of power. Upholding the tariffs would legitimize sweeping executive authority, making it hard for future presidents to reverse course. The justices weren't just interpreting a law, they were deciding the future of presidential power over the economy. Their ruling would have immediate economic effects and set a precedent for generations. In the end, the court chose to limit the president's use of emergency powers for trade. This decision was a rebuke to executive overreach, but left other presidential tariff powers untouched. The debate over the scope of presidential authority is far from over. Trump's tariffs brought a dramatic surge in government revenue, with the effective tariff rate jumping from just 2% to over 17% in a matter of months. This marked one of the most significant shifts in U.S. trade policy in decades, signaling a new era of economic nationalism and protectionism. In 2025 alone, the Treasury collected more than $213 billion in tariffs, a record-breaking figure that far surpassed previous years. This influx of cash helped shore up government finances and was touted as a win for American taxpayers. But the real cost was felt by American businesses and families, who paid higher prices as importers passed on the tariffs. Everyday shopping trips became more stressful, and small business owners struggled to keep up with rising expenses. Everyday items, from kitchen cabinets to semi-trucks, and even pharmaceuticals, became more expensive, fueling inflation and squeezing household budgets. For many, the rising costs meant putting off big purchases or cutting back on essentials. Some domestic industries like steel benefited from the protection, seeing increased demand and job growth. But others, especially agriculture, suffered from retaliatory tariffs imposed by trading partners, leading to lost export markets and financial hardship for farmers. Businesses faced mounting uncertainty, scrambling to adjust supply chains, find new suppliers, and absorb rising costs. Many companies had to rethink their entire sourcing strategies, leading to delays and disruptions. The tariffs created clear winners and losers, reshaping the economic landscape in unpredictable ways. While some sectors thrived, others faced layoffs, closures, and shrinking profits. While the government's balance sheet improved, the broader economy faced higher costs, increased volatility, and growing instability. Investors watched nervously as markets reacted to each new tariff announcement. Tariffs proved to be a blunt instrument, not a precise tool. They disrupted trade flows, complicated business planning, and left many Americans wondering about the long-term consequences. The effects will linger long after the legal battles end, shaping the American economy for years to come and leaving a legacy of both opportunity and challenge. The Supreme Court's decision struck down Trump's use of IEPA for broad tariffs, reaffirming Congress's primary role in trade and taxation. The trafficking tariffs and universal 10% tariff are now invalid, but Section 232 tariffs, justified on national security grounds, remain in place. The administration has already pivoted to expand these tariffs, keeping much of the tariff regime intact. The ruling sets up new legal and political battles over what counts as national security. Congress may need to update old laws to clarify presidential powers in the modern era. For Americans, some relief from rising prices may come, but economic uncertainty continues. The Supreme Court has drawn a line on emergency powers, but the fight over trade and executive authority is just beginning. This landmark judgment opens a new chapter in America's economic story.